Hello everyone, welcome to ITLS Academy. Our today's lecture is on principles of microbial pathogenicity and epidemiology. Let's start with introduction. The majority of microorganisms are free living and derive their nutrition from inert organic and inorganic materials. The association of such microorganisms with humans is generally harmonious, as the majority of these encountered are benign and indeed are often vital to balanced ecosystem. In spite of the ubiquity of microorganisms, the tissue of healthy animals and plants are essentially microbe-free. This is achieved through provision of a non-specific defenses to those tissues and specific defenses such as antibiotics acquired after exposure to particular agents. The ability of bacteria and fungi to establish infections varies considerably. Some are rarely, if ever, isolated from infected tissues, whilst opportunistic pathogens, example Pseudomonas aeruginosa, can establish themselves only in compromised tissues. Compromised tissues means tissues having low immune ability. Only a few species of bacteria may be regarded as obligate pathogens, for which animals, plants, or humans are the only reservoir for their existence. For example, Neisseria gonorrhoeae. Viruses, on the other hand, must parasitize host cells in order to replicate and are therefore inevitably associated with disease. Even amongst the viruses and obligate bacterial pathogens, the degree of virulence varies, in that some are able to coexist with the host without causing the disease state. For example, staphylococci, whilst others will always manifest diseases. The course of infections can be considered as a sequence of separate events. In order for an infection to develop, pathogenic microorganisms must increase their numbers within the host more rapidly than the host can eliminate or kill them. Greater numbers of cells in the initial challenge to the host will increase the chances of Successful colonization. Let's study portals of entry of microorganisms in human body. The parts of the body most widely exposed to microorganism in the skin. Intact skin is usually impervious to microorganism. Its surface contains relatively few nutrients and is of acid pH, which is unfavorable for microbial growth. Most of the time, microorganisms do not grow in acidic pH. The vast majority of organisms falling onto the skin surface will die. The remainder must compete for nutrients with the commensal microflora in order to grow. These commensals are highly adapted to growth on the skin and will normally prevent the establishment of adventitious contaminants. Infections of the skin itself, such as ringworm, that is trichophyton, rarely, if ever, involve penetration of the epidermis. The weak spots or Achilles heels of the body occur where the skin ends and the mucous epithelial tissues begin. These mucous membranes present a much more favorable environment for microbial growth than the skin, in that they are warm, moist, and rich in nutrients. So, microbes prefer mucous membrane for their growth. Such membranes nevertheless possess certain characteristics that allow them to resist infections. The majority, for example, possess their own highly adapted commensal microflora, which must be displaced by any invading organism. These resistant flora vary greatly between different sites of the body but are usually common to particular host species. Each site can be additionally protected by physiochemical barriers such as extreme acid pH in the stomach, the presence of freely circulating non-specific antibodies or opsonins, or by macrophage and phagocytes. Okay, in this series of portals of entry, first of all, we are going to discuss respiratory tract. Air contains a large amount of suspended organic matter, and enclosed occupied spaces may hold up to 1000 microorganism meter cube. Almost all of these airborne organisms are non-pathogenic bacteria and fungi, of which The average person would inhale approximately 10,000 per day. The respiratory tract is protected against this assault by a mucociliary blanket which envelops the lower respiratory tract and nasal cavity. Particles becoming entrapped in this blanket of mucus are carried by ciliary action to the back of the throat and swallowed. The alveolar regions are in addition protected by a lining of macrophages. To be successful, a pathogen must avoid being trapped in the mucus and swallowed, and if deposited in the alveolar sacs, must avoid engulfment by macrophages or resist subsequent digestion by them. The possession of surface adhesions specific for epithelial receptors adds attachment of the invading microorganism and avoidance of removal by the mucociliary blanket. Next is our intestinal tract. The intestinal tract must contend with whatever it is given in terms of food and drink. The lower gut is highly populated by commensal microorganisms. These organisms are often associated with the intestinal wall, either embedded in layers of protective mucus or attached directly to the epithelial cells. The pathogenicity of incoming bacteria and viruses depends upon their ability to survive passes through the stomach and duodenum, and upon their activity for attachment to or penetration of the gut wall in competition with the commensal flora and in spite of the presence of secretory antibodies. Next is urogenital tract. In healthy individuals, the bladder, ureter, and urethra are sterile, and sterile urine constantly flushes the urine tract. Organism invading the urinary tract must avoid being detached from the epithelial surfaces and washed out during urination. Bladder infections are much more common in the female. Spread of the infection from the bladder to the kidneys can easily occur through the reflux of urine into the ureter. As for the implantation of devices across the skin barrier. Long-term catheterization of the bladder will promote the occurrence of bacteriurias with all of the associated complications. For example, lactic acid in the vagina gives it an acidic pH that is 5, which together with other products of the metabolism inhibits colonization by most bacteria except some lactobacilli, which constitute the commensal flora. Next is conjunctiva. The conjunctiva is usually free of microorganisms and protected by the continuous flow of secretions from lacrimal and other glands and by frequent mechanical cleansing of its surface by the eyelid periphery during blinking. Damage to the conjunctiva caused through mechanical abrasion or reduction in tear flow will increase microbial adhesions and allow colonization by opportunistic pathogens. The likelihood of infection is thus promoted by the use of soft and hard contact lenses, physical damage, exposure to chemicals, or damage and infection of the eyelid borders. Consolidation. To be successful, a pathogen must be able to survive at its initial portal of entry, frequently in competition with the commensal flora and subject to the attention of macrophages and wandering white blood cells. Such survival invariably requires the organism to attach itself firmly to the epithelial surface. This attachment must be highly specific in order to displace the commensal microflora and subsequently governs the course of an infection. Attachment can be mediated through provision on the bacterial surface of adhesive substances such as mucopeptide and mucopolysaccharide slime layers and fimbriae, pili and agglutinin. The outcome of the encounter between the tissue and potential pathogens is governed by the ability of the microorganism to multiply at a faster rate than they are removed from those tissues. Factors which influence this are the organism's rate of growth, the initial number of organisms arriving at the site, and their ability to resist the efforts of the host tissues at killing it. Resistance to host's defense. Most bacterial infections confine themselves to the surface of epithelial tissues. These include Bordetella pertussis, Corynebacterium diphtheria, and Vibrio cholerae. This is to a large extent a reflection of their inability to combat this that host's deeper defense. Survival at these sites is largely due to firm attachment to the epithelial cells. Such organisms manifest disease through the production and release of toxins. Other group of organisms regularly establish systemic infections. Example: Brucella abortus, Salmonella typhi, and Streptococcus pyogenes after traversing the epithelial surfaces. This property is associated with their ability either to gain entry into susceptible cells and thereby enjoy protection from the body's defenses, or to be phagocytosed by macrophages or polymorphs, yet resist their lethal action and multiply within them. Other organisms are able to multiply and grow freely in the body's extracellular fluids. Microorganisms have evolved a number of different strategies which allow them to suppress the host's normal defenses and thereby surviving in the tissues. These are considered later. Modulation of the inflammatory responses. Growth of microorganism releases cellular products into their surrounding medium, many of which causes non-specific inflammation associated with dilation of blood vessels. This increases capillary flow and access of phagocytes to the infected sites. Increased lymphatic flow from the inflamed tissues carries the organism to lymph nodes, where further antimicrobial and immune forces come into play. Avoidance of phagocytosis. Resistance to phagocytosis is sometimes associated with specific components of the cell wall and or with the presence of capsules surrounding the cell wall. Classic examples of these are the M proteins of the streptococci and the polysaccharide capsules of pneumococci. The acidic polysaccharide K antigens of Escherichia coli and Salmonella typhi behave similarly in that: point 1. They can mediate attachment to the intestinal epithelial cells. Point 2. They render phagocytosis more difficult. So we can say generally possession of an extracellular capsule will reduce the likelihood of phagocytosis. Survival following phagocytosis. Death following phagocytosis can be avoided if the microorganisms are not exposed to the intracellular processes, that is, killing and digestion within the phagocyte. This is possible if fusion of the lysosome with phagocytic vacuoles can be prevented. Such a strategy is employed by virulent Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Although the precise mechanism is unknown, other bacteria seem able to grow within the vacuoles despite lysosomal fusion. Killing of phagocytes. An alternative strategy is for the microorganism to kill the phagocyte. The killing of phagocytes can be achieved by the production of leukocidins. For example, Staphylococci and Streptococci, which promote the discharge of lysosomal substances into the cytoplasm of the phagocyte rather than into the vacuoles, thus directing the phagocyte's lethal activity towards itself. So thank you very much guys for watching this session. This was all about principles of microbial pathogenicity and epidemiology. This is first part of the lecture. In the next lecture, we will deal with manifestation of diseases, non-invasive pathogens and invasive pathogens, their active and passive spreads, damage to tissues, direct and indirect damage, non-specific effects, indirect damage, and recovery from infections and exit of microorganisms from the body. We will also study epidemiology of infectious diseases in our next lecture of principles of microbial pathogenicity and epidemiology. In this lecture, we have covered introduction of principles of microbial pathogenicity. We have also discussed portals of entry that include respiratory tract, intestinal tract, urogenital tract, and many more. We have also studied resistance to host defense, and remaining things we will cover in the principles of microbial pathogenicity and epidemiology part 2. So thank you very much for watching this session. We will continue this lecture in our upcoming sessions. You can subscribe ITLS Academy on YouTube, and you can also get app of ITLS Academy from Google Play Store. Thank you very much for watching this session.